The Unbiased Self, The Psychology of Overcoming Cognitive Bias by Erin Devers is a deeply thoughtful and methodically structured exploration of how cognitive biases shape human perception, reasoning, and behavior, and what we can do to change it. Devers, a psychologist with both academic and clinical experience, weaves empirical research with practical applications and personal anecdotes to present a book that feels both intellectually rich and psychologically intimate. Her core thesis is clear: although bias is a natural byproduct of how the human brain processes information, we are not helpless against it. With the right mindset and tools, we can cultivate a more accurate, fair, and self-aware way of engaging with the world. The book opens with a disarming observation: bias is not a moral failing but a cognitive shortcut. It's the brain's attempt to economize attention, to navigate the overwhelming complexity of daily life. From confirmation bias to availability heuristics, Devers explains how these mental habits evolve to serve us, yet often sabotage us when they go unchecked. She makes it clear that cognitive biases are universal, not confined to any political group, social class, or educational level. Her tone is non-judgmental, which encourages readers to engage in honest self-reflection. What makes Devers' approach distinctive is her attention to the emotional underpinnings of bias. She argues that bias is not just about thinking errors but also about emotional comfort and identity protection. People cling to biases because they offer psychological security, affirmation of beliefs, reinforcement of group belonging, and protection from cognitive dissonance. In this light, overcoming bias isn't just an intellectual task, it's an emotional challenge that requires humility and resilience. Devers uses storytelling to bring these abstract ideas to life. She describes a woman who consistently undervalued her employees' ideas unless they echoed her own, and a teacher whose grading patterns favored students who shared her cultural background. These aren't villains, they're relatable, well-meaning people whose self-concepts were at odds with their unconscious behaviors. Through these examples, Devers illustrates how bias often hides in habits, instincts, and good intentions. Rather than focusing solely on bias as a social problem, Devers takes a psychological and personal angle. She explores the internal mechanisms that maintain bias, such as motivated reasoning and belief perseverance. One chapter is devoted to the illusion of objectivity, where people assume they see the world clearly while others are distorted by ideology. Devers shows how this illusion sustains echo chambers and leads to fractured relationships, even among close friends or family members. To counteract this, she introduces the practice of metacognition, thinking about one's own thinking. Through mindfulness exercises, journaling prompts, and Socratic questioning, she encourages readers to interrogate their assumptions. A recurring theme is curiosity over certainty. Devers champions intellectual humility, the willingness to revise one's views, and the courage to sit with not knowing. In her view, these are not signs of weakness but hallmarks of psychological maturity. Crucially, Devers integrates insights from neuroscience. She explains how biases are encoded as neural pathways, strengthened over time by repetition and emotional reinforcement. But just as pathways can be created, they can also be restructured. Citing recent studies in neuroplasticity, she outlines how intentional thought patterns, such as seeking disconfirming evidence or considering alternative viewpoints, can gradually rewire the brain. This scientific grounding provides hope: the mind is not fixed. Devers also emphasizes the role of identity in perpetuating bias. People form self-concepts that are tied to certain beliefs or social groups, and any threat to those identities can activate defensive thinking. To overcome this, she advocates for what she calls identity expansion, learning to see oneself as a multifaceted, evolving being rather than as a static member of any one group. This flexibility, she argues, is key to reducing tribalism and increasing openness. The book doesn't shy away from the challenges of change. Devers acknowledges that it's hard to question one's worldview, especially when surrounded by communities that reward conformity. She discusses the emotional discomfort that arises from confronting internal contradictions and the temptation to retreat into old thought patterns. But she also shows how sustained self-awareness, social accountability, and compassionate self-talk can turn these moments of discomfort into turning points. In one of the most impactful chapters, Devers explores how bias affects personal relationships. She shows how assumptions, misperceptions, and emotional filters distort communication between partners, friends, and colleagues. By applying cognitive bias awareness to interpersonal conflicts, asking what assumptions one might be making, what evidence supports them, and whether alternative explanations exist, readers can begin to rebuild trust and empathy in their relationships. Devers turns her attention to organizational settings as well, exploring how workplace culture often amplifies bias through informal norms, performance evaluations, and decision-making structures. She shares case studies of companies that have implemented bias audits, feedback loops, and inclusive design thinking to create more equitable systems. Again, she avoids simplistic solutions, emphasizing that real change requires long-term commitment and cultural transformation. Throughout the book, Devers is transparent about her own journey. She shares moments of embarrassment, blind spots she discovered in her thinking, and the ongoing effort it takes to live in alignment with her values. This vulnerability makes her message more authentic and encourages readers to approach their own biases not with shame, but with honesty and resolve. The conclusion is both inspiring and grounded. Devers doesn't promise a bias-free future. Such a state, she implies, is unrealistic. Instead, she invites readers to adopt a lifelong practice of awareness, self-correction, and compassion. The goal is not to become perfect thinkers, but better ones. People who strive to understand before judging, who listen before reacting, who seek truth over comfort. Ultimately, the unbiased self is a guide not just to clearer thinking, but to deeper living. It's about becoming more aware of how our minds work, more responsible for how we respond, and more connected to others in the process. In a world filled with division, distortion, and defensiveness, Devers offers a roadmap for becoming more human, curious, thoughtful, and free.